Hello all, and welcome back to the visual novel Phenomeno. This is episode number 3. Last time, Nagi had finally realized that the countdown was still going on, and it continues to this very day. Welcome back. This is DaaroDS, and I'm going to continue on with more Phenomeno as we get set for an all-out run. Yoshi planted her face almost right into the engravings and mumbled happily, "This place is real." But I said with a hollow voice, "I'm at my limit." Fall. The new apartment was fantastic. The pretty clean flooring, the new wallpaper, the sterilized unit bath. It wasn't right comparing it to that house, but where the previous inhabitants' remnants drifted everywhere, but I definitely learned that it wasn't right to skimp on housing expenses. This was even further from the university, but houses were nearby. I would walk to a convenience store, and there were plenty of streetlights. This apartment, which was brightly lit even at night, was introduced to me by Karasu. From what I heard, one of Karasu's acquaintances was the landlord for this apartment, and she was renting a room here too. It annoyed me a bit that the room was simply a warehouse, a place to put paranormal cursing equipment, apparently, for her. But I couldn't complain. Rent rocked to 50,000 yen. But there was 6 tatami, 1K with a loft and a unit bath, so it was extremely cheap for the area. It had been 1 week since I looked at that paranormal house with Yoshi. Right after noon on a Sunday, on a rare day with no part-time work, no lectures. I opened the window and took in the comfortable breeze as I sprawled out in the empty room. The previous week had passed by quickly. First, I cried to my big sister and borrowed some money, and immediately moved here. I didn't want to enter the house ever again, and it was expensive having to hire people, but it was worth it. Furthermore, this apartment's walls were so thin that you would almost instinctively want to pick up your neighbor's ringing phones, which made it feel like you were among living people, and you could greet people in the hallways. And if you opened the windows, you could hear the lackadaisical voice of the bamboo pole merchants. Basically, this place was overflowing with life. For me, that was extremely important. As I'd been drained of mental energy to the extremes, I required the comfort of living amidst people. I never met Yoshi again. That night, I gave her a lift to the family restaurant and parted ways. Everything about her was a mystery, other than the fact that she was a high school student and that her real name was Mitsurugi Yoichi. I spoke with her a bit as I escaped to the train station, but I never found out what was going on with that house. She didn't try to explain, and I wasn't in any hurry to ask. However, I had a strange conviction that something bad was there. Every night I heard something eerie, and I even ate a countdown, but mostly I believed it because Yoshi's one phrase, "This place is real," that this was not a place I could deal with. I immediately thought that. If you think about it that way, she was why I was able to make the decision to place myself in such a peaceful place, but it was true what they say, that when the blade is no longer to your throat, you regain your curiosity. Now that was all in the past, I was truthfully somewhat curious. What did she notice? What was the countdown? What is Yoshi anyways? It was hard to explain, but she seemed different from just an occult maniac. It wasn't like she was getting a thrill out of coming close to danger, but rather, she seemed to have no instinct telling her to avoid dangerous areas. In other words, it was hard to explain her as anything but someone wanting to die. Whenever she said something, I felt like the world I believed and lived in was about to crumble apart. Sometimes I would take a peek at Basuchi. I gotta stop calling it, man. The Ikaigabuchi. But Yoshi never appeared on the thread. And of course, no one ever reacted to the thread I'd started. It had been buried deep at the point where I didn't want to revive it. Krishna descended upon the various threads, but he never touched on my or Yoshi's case. That was real. I wanted to write. But I had no means of proving myself, and I myself felt fuzzy about it, so I kept myself to an ordinary life. Indeed, daily life continued. An increased living expense and an abundance of light and heat. My scholarship was insufficient, so I began working part-time at an Italian restaurant near the train station. I wanted to pay back the moving funds that I borrowed from my big sis too, so I started working whenever I had no lectures. My city survival began as I worked myself to exhaustion and flung a tired smile everywhere. A week flew by, and it was that sort of day. My first university lecture in a while had just ended, and I was stuffing my textbooks into my bag when I realized a girl I recognized was staring at me. She was short, yet her breasts were big enough to notice through her clothing. That's obvious. Her hair was cut straight, like a zashiki warashi, and her face resembled that of a young middle schooler, matching her red-framed glasses. Who's that? I stared right back at her, and she cleared her throat once, and then came over. She started taking something out of her pocket, and then put it back. I saw that there was some sort of paper. She walked over me standing straight and still, and in the end, never took out that piece of paper. She had a bit of a vexed expression as she glared at me, although her babyish face made it lose its bite, and then clicked her tongue and then turned away. Hey! I couldn't stop myself from calling out to her. What do you want? Speak up! The straight-haired girl turned back around and said, Idiot! Idiot! Despite being mild-mannered, I wasn't one to stand being insulted by a girl I'd never met before. Why are you being so rude? Why are you being so rude? What's your name? What grade are you? I asked, but she simply snapped back. Shut up! It's your fault it's your fault to begin with. This extreme pointing, oh my god. And then she pointed her small index finger at me. It's because of scum like you that these things keep happening like this. Learn your place, fool. Fool, you. After that, she rapidly asked me, Do your shoulders ache? Do your ears ring? Are you able to sleep at night? Was she some sort of doctor's apprentice? Did this university even have a medical college? While I was bewildered, a girl finally pulled out the piece of paper from her pocket. She stuck it under my nose. I had no time to take it as she ran off like a rabbit. By the time I picked it up, she had already left the classroom. hell was that? No one was left in the classroom by then, so I looked at the piece of paper I held. It was like a handmade business card. It just read, Beatnik Research Club President, Kurimoto Shina. And it had the location of the Beatnik Research Club situated on the western wing. That night I saw a dream. In my dream, I was still living in that house. That old 3-story mountain cottage near the riverbank. There I was, looking at myself. It was like I'd spiritually departed from my body and was floating in space and was gazing upon me, living my life. The me down there was showing no signs of noticing me, and I continued living normally. It seemed that I was watching a bit of the past. I was living carefree, as I hadn't learned the fear of the noises at night. Hey, come on, stop with this house, I wanted to tell him. But as a person just drifting in a dream, there was nothing I could do. All I could do was to observe. Eventually I noticed that Yoshi was sitting next to me. The two of us were sitting together in the old sofa I had picked up after moving. The two of us didn't speak to each other, instead just going on with our lives individually. I was yawning as I watched TV, while she was quietly reading an old book. It was just a dream, so it was free to make up any situation it wanted. But I still thought it was odd. However, I also accepted if I were to live together with her, neither of us would really interfere with the other. Eventually, the me down there got bored of the TV and proceeded to stretch, wash his face, and brush his teeth. I thought about studying a bit, but instead I just immediately went to sleep. As I observed myself as an outsider, I realized that I was a pretty boring person. I boasted that I would turn the fortunes of my family's lumber business that was downtrodden and had departed Shizuoka in opposition of my father and big sister, failed to get into the seminar I wanted, and wandered occult sites. Plus I hadn't even written a single letter to my mother, who I promised to send a letter to after coming to Tokyo. Finally I'd moved to the haunted house because of low rent, and run into a psychotic girl. I wanted to slap myself. As I sighed and glared, I quickly curled up into my bedroom. Even though Yoshi was there, it seemed that I could not see her as I turned off the light. Yoshi seemed to notice the light had gone off as she closed her book and stared off into space. I'd floated down to Yoshi, thinking I'd turn the light on for her. It's about time. I had a bad feeling from Yoshi's words. And then, in the darkness, with only moonlight illumination, I heard that sound. From somewhere, the sound of something is being scraped. An ominous melody ringing across the border connecting this world and the other. As if something was trying to crawl out of the sealed dimension. As I heard that sound, my body slowly froze. It was like watching those supernatural shows on TV, where they set up a camera in rooms that were ghosts are rumored to appear. This dream, isn't it bad? I needed to wake up as soon as possible. Because if I stay here like this, I would be the something that was engraving the numbers into this house. I would see the something. I frantically tried to wake up. I waved my limbs around trying to touch something, but I could not wake myself up from the dream. It was like my body had been caught by some black hand, seeping out of a different world. Feeling the despair of having been locked into a room with no exit within the dream, only my panting echoed. and suddenly I found myself next to Yoshi. On the old leather sofa, Yoshi and I were embracing each other. As if I were trying to stain both my palms with Yoshi's body temperature, I played with her body. That was my wish, and yet it wasn't. I mean, of course, I had some interest in girls as a simple 18-year-old boy, but my lusting wasn't this twisted. I wasn't the type to release my sexual lusts by turning myself into an unseen existence. I was pretty sure that I had that much reason in me anyways. However, Yoshi showed no signs of fear. If anything, she was in a state of ecstasy. Her expression was dangerous. I felt my reason making sounds as it broke apart. I licked Yoshi's skin. I groped her breasts through her clothes. I lusted over her soft body with the tips of my fingers. I pulled up her long skirt, showing her white thighs. Yoshi's eyes were barely open. Her lips were slightly parted, and I could see her white teeth. Stop. 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 I screamed from within my body, but I couldn't restrain my abnormal extreme lusting. However, the moment I placed my hand on her white wrist, I almost screamed. My arms were not ones I'd become accustomed to seeing, rather were long and thin, if anything that of an aged man. Those sleeves were gray and worn. I was wearing an old suit. I felt like I faintly smelled some cologne. I stretched out my trembling arms and felt my face, my nose, my lips. And what I felt was hideously not mine. It was definitely that of someone else. And I knew whose it was. Him. That man exiting the edge of my vision, and finally my face tilted against my will. My face pointed towards the window ahead, toward the moonlight. And my eyes locked with the man covering Yoshi. That instant, I lost consciousness. Along with incredible trembling, I woke up. It was my new apartment with the abnormally bright lighting from the lamp. To my side was a coffee table with the empty box of convenience store meal I'd just eaten and an unfinished bottle of oolong tea. Near my pillow was textbooks and notebooks for university I had been tossed about. There was a cheap curtain between me and the sash to the small veranda, and it swayed a bit from the night breeze coming in through the gap in the sash. I breathed deeply. My heart was still pounding. I came home from work, ate a bit, and then had fallen asleep. Fuck off with scaring me. I felt malice towards no one in particular, and grabbed the bottle. I gulped down the third or so that was left from the oolong tea. I felt incredibly thirsty, even though the lukewarm oolong tea tasted delicious. When I finished, I felt a bit calmer, and I scratched my hair as I exhaled sharply. Calm down. Just a dream. It was just 2 weeks ago. It's not surprising to have some fear still in my heart. That's why I saw that dream. That's all. I mumbled to myself in an effort to persuade myself, but my heart didn't stop pounding. I could still feel Yoshi's soft body in my hands. Isn't that weird? It's kind of weird how you can have a dream and then you can still feel something after the dream, and it's really peculiar about how that happens. And it is really perplexing. It's really odd. And I think it's really cool how that sometimes it happens. Anyway, then I realized that something was ringing in my head. It was like a phone from next door. Like a cell phone in my pocket. Was still ringing. A quiet but definite warning sound. What's bothering you? I looked around. New white wallpaper surrounded me, and there was just a spacious vacant room that hadn't been able to fill with furniture. Nothing had changed between before and after I'd slept. However, the bell inside my head kept ringing. What is it? I stood up and looked around the room again. There was nothing nothing out of the ordinary. The after effects of the scary dream were just bothering me, that's all. I was trying to think of when I noticed it. Next to the wall was a ladder leading to the small loft. The lighting for the loft was different, so it was slightly dark there. Just then I felt something cold travel down my spine. Why did I pick a place with a loft? That dark area where it felt like someone might jump out at me from gave me bad thoughts. However, it felt like there was a warning inside, like the warning inside me was directed straight at the loft. I mustered the courage to look up, and the warning sound grew louder. I swallowed once and turned on the light to the loft next to the ladder. I placed a foot on the ladder, climbing it one step at a time. And then I willed myself to look in the loft. Of course, there was no one on the loft. The only thing there was a cheap sleeping bag I'd bought instead of a blanket, and a number of books that were scattered about. I breathed with relief, and was just about to climb down when I noticed it. On the other side of the sleeping bag, at the furthest wall, I saw something. Wounds. 2 lines had been violently drawn. I screamed a silent scream as I tumbled from the ladder. I made a loud sound as my knee and shoulder struck the ground, but I didn't care. Somehow I managed to grab my wallet and cell phone, and I jumped out of the door. Not lines. Those weren't lines. That was... 2. The number 2. I hadn't even moved, but the countdown continued. I jumped in the night city and ran to a convenience store in search of a light. As I ran, I tapped at my cell phone, accessing Ikaigabuchi, and then I looked at the form from end to end. I didn't care if it was Karasu or Sue or Yoshi or anyone. I desperately looked for someone I knew, and then I saw it in a thread titled Mysterious Dimension Star Isai Jinsu. A mere 30 minutes ago, Yoshi had posted, ignoring the serious discussion of how to see Yata no Kagami at the Koata Jingju. I posted there, "Hey Yoshi, help me." The occult maniacs who I had their debates interrupted laughed at my spontaneous post, but I ignored them. "Yoshi, if you're reading this, aren't you? Talk to me. He's still following me." But of course, Yoshi never answered, and it just angered the Issei Jinsu Jungu maniacs. Even after reading the Reaching the convenience store, I looked around Ikaigabuchi while I was in the parking lot. I tried writing in the places Yoshi might find interesting to contact me immediately. But maybe I'd posted too often because the entire forum rose up in arms calling me a spammer. If I got banned, I would have trouble contacting her, so I started responding, no, I'm not a spammer. I'm seriously in trouble. But people just coolly responded that I was spamming. Eventually others began calling me wannabe and got pissed off and started and I got pissed off and shouted at them, "You scum occult maniacs," and the flames continued. It was like 100 versus 1 as the flames continued being spat. Right as I was feeling like the world was against me and I was about to slam my phone against the ground. Are you Nagi? Someone wrote that. When I looked at the name, it said Krishna. That name was like a miracle descending upon me, and I almost crumbled to the ground. I tried to type a response, but my fingers were trembling too much. As I struggled like that, Krishna posted again. And it said, "Come to the place written on that card I gave you this afternoon." It was past 2 a.m. I'd left my bicycle behind, so I plodded my way to the university on foot. Of course, the front gate was closed, and the security guard looked at me suspiciously. In an effort to escape from that look, I took a wide arc that went along the fencing toward the line of the Zalkova trees on the left. After you walk a bit here, you get to the western wing, which housed the Beatnik Research Club room. Kurimoto Krishna. I was so careless. I noticed nothing. That the administrator of Ikaigabuchi, Krishna, was a person who attended the same university. That for that baby-faced girl to be Krishna was unimaginable. Stupid mouse. When I went straight to the furthest room and was shocked when I entered. There was still some students inside chatting with each other. I felt a bit exasperated, as though this was some sort of Nevernight Castle, but I guess this was just a way for the students, and it was just the way it was for students, and so I felt a bit embarrassed about myself still being afraid of ghosts. My feet felt heavy as I arrived at the Beatnik Research Club on the 3rd floor, and I saw light on the other side of the smoked glass. I knocked on the door and heard a familiar voice, so I said, "It's Nagi. Yamada Nagito." "It's open. Excuse me." When I opened the door, I found myself facing an empty, concrete-walled room, about 10 tatamis. There was a single steel cabinet placed against the wall. In the middle was a relatively large work table. And there were 4 seats placed around that table, and 3 people seated. In the middle was the baby-faced girl who had given me a business card in my classroom. The red-framed glasses were odd as usual, but she was wearing what seemed to be a priestess outfit stained in black, had on a takagita, and sat on a seat. This suited her too well, and I had no interest in such types, but I could almost understand how people who liked lollies and people who liked cosplay felt, which was scary. Are you Krishna?" I asked, and the girl made a disdainful face and nodded. "I warned you to leave that house immediately." "Huh. Karasu told you nothing?" "Nothing at all." And then Krishna cutely clicked her tongue and said, "Well, come in." I looked around the room again, and next to the small occult site administrator was a woman who seemed to be in her late 20s and did not seem like a student wearing a simple white Eastern clothing. And a bald, middle-aged man wearing monk attire who, no matter what, looked nothing at all like a student. I didn't know how to greet them, so I just stood bewildered at them at the entrance. And Krishna made a motion with her small chin to sit there. I sat down in the chair that had been prepared for me. When the middle-aged monk stood behind me and grabbed my shoulders with his thick arms. Hey, what's going on? And then Krishna pushed her glasses up and asked, why are you trying to see the other side on your own accord? And then she began lecturing me in a stern voice. All right? As long as we don't look, they can't see us either. You can't have interest in the occult. It's natural and unavoidable of people who have interest in things that are little understood. Still, the other side has the other side's business. To them, not being able to see does not count as an excuse. Even though you can't see them, humans have enough power to be able to feel them. This is eerie, and then immediately understand that there's something you can't see and pay it due respect. In the face of her stern look, I, the fool, could understand. So basically, I've been possessed, and I asked tearfully. At this rate, you're pretty screwed. Her expression became even sterner as I froze. Krishna, said a woman in white clothes. She had no makeup on and held a strangely shaped rosary in her hand. It has already gotten a bit inside. What? What inside? Can't you pull it out here? I'll try. The two of them finished their strange conversation. Wait, Krishna, who are those two? I asked as I tried to escape from the strong monk. Investigators for the Ikaigabuchi, answered Krishna bluntly. Investigators? I'll explain later. Just shut up and stay still. It's no use. It's no use. The host isn't here. I heard a female voice from far away. We have to go to that house. You're right. The middle-aged man and Krishna's voice echoed a bit like the record was losing some speed. It began to slump down. The monk was strong. I'd begun to slump down. The monk was strong, but that wasn't their only reason. It was as if I never noticed that I was on the verge of toppling over under extreme weight. And as soon as I realized that, my body's senses frantically tried to show me the level of exhaustion I felt. I felt that sort of exhaustion, one that tried to sink me into a bottomless pit. You can't move? Then don't move. Krishna said that in a mysteriously kind voice, and then I lost consciousness. Alright, that's going to do it for episode number 3 of Phenomeno, as we get a little bit dicey here, as it turns out that it is back, the countdown is continuing, and I might be possessed. As Krishna turned out to be that young girl who came into my classroom like a crazy lolly and called me a baka multiple times, urusai, and told me to shut up. And so we found out that she is actually Krishna, who is the Ikaigabuchi administrator. And so what will we find out after we come to regain our consciousness? Are we going back? It looks like we might go back to her house. So I will catch you guys next time on the ever-fabled Phenomeno. I'll catch you guys next time. This is DaaroDS, and I'll see you guys soon. Peace.